Okay, this video is a book review. The name of the book is What's So Great About Christianity by Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh D'Souza is a pretty famous guy. He's a guy of Indian descent who was raised Christian, actually in a family that was sort of Catholic from the Portuguese. But he really has more what I would consider a Protestant mentality on Christianity, given that India was controlled to a large extent by England. And he sort of has that Protestant Anglican mentality. He nowadays calls himself non-denominational. This book really reminds me of sort of a new, updated version of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. I'll share with you what it's about, what's good about it, what I think is weak about it. Okay, so in the vein of a Protestant apologetics for Christianity, he's a smart guy. He tells the truth. He says, in order to explain why you are a Christian, you must know what is great about Christianity. And then he talks about how atheists will speak. For example, Stephen Jay Gould, a sort of famous evolutionary biology writing guy, said that, secular society relies on reason and decides matters of fact, while religion is for people of faith and it decides questions of values. And that's total horseshit. Let me tell you something about science. The best science has been done by Christians, okay? And you have to have Christian ethics. You don't have to be a Christian, but you need Christian ethics in science or it becomes a joke. Modern science in medicine, in nutrition, it has all become mostly a big joke for a very simple reason. Christianity says follow the 10 commandments, okay? That what you do to the least of my brethren, you're doing to me. You're not supposed to lie to the proles, all right? Versus once you get rid of Christianity, there are no morals. There is no right or wrong. If there is no God, then life has no meaning and there is no right or wrong. So then what ends up happening is power controls everything. And in the modern world, power means money. So big money controls everything. Who's got the money? The big corporations. So the big corporations, they buy the journals, they buy the scientists, and they just publish fake papers that advertise their products. And the science becomes a joke. The drug companies always publish a study that says their drug is good. Okay, then everybody else is forced to follow their research, even though it's just fake promotional nonsense, all right? So what I'm trying to say, this argument that atheism is more objective is not true. Atheism means whatever big money wants is what is made the rule, okay? And I like the fact that he supported what Thomas Aquinas said. No, there is not two separate truths. There is only one truth. Religion is compatible with the truth. The modern scientific method came from Christianity. It didn't come from atheism. Okay, and science doesn't work long-term in atheism. You can have an individual atheistic person here or there who follows Christian ethics, but it turns into a joke. And, it was Thomas Aquinas' idea of faith and reason go together. He baptized Aristotle into the Catholic Church, and they developed the university system, the scholastics, Alfred the Great and him, throughout Europe, and that led to the university system in the USA. Basically, the great universities were founded by Christian men. Okay, that's just a fact. Atheists say life has no meaning. Why would you make a university if life has no meaning, other than to brainwash people so you can control them and force them into slavery? Okay. Atheism says that man is just a talking monkey, like Darwinism. Therefore, he has no rights, no intrinsic value. What good is he? Any extra people, you might as well just grind them up and make them into dog food. You think that sounds harsh? That's exactly what farmers do. If farmers own cattle, they have no use for cattle. They can grind it up and feed it to the other animals. Well, if a human has no value and they're just owned by the secular ruler, the secular ruler can do whatever they want. They can genetically, immunologically test them for organ compatibility and just use them for transplant organ donors, okay? The individual has no rights and no purpose and no value if you have an atheistic society. People think atheism is cool until they realize it means that they have no value and no rights. They're just a farm animal owned by the ruler, okay? So he continues. He talks about how the Bible-based view of man, that he is created in the image of God, that he has intrinsic worth and rights, that he is a child of God. It provides tremendous praise to the poor individual man, much more than the Greeks or Romans ever did, much more than atheism does. It says that his life has meaning. He's part of one of the good guys in the struggle between good and evil. You look at atheists like Edward Gibbon, the English historian, who wrote that he felt that the fall of the Roman Empire was due to Christianity, but that's actually not true. The Romans had declined for many reasons, including decadence, lead in their pipes, their plumbing to their aristocrats, and it was the Christians who rebuilt civilization through the monasteries, okay? He also talks, of course, about culture. Everything culturally beautiful in the West comes from Christianity. They made the great paintings, the great buildings, the cathedrals, the beautiful music. Look at the music. Bach, Handel, Beethoven, Mozart, and all the other great ones. Okay, they're all a bunch of Christian men. The literature, Dante, the stories of King Arthur, Shakespeare, Milton, they're all a bunch of Christian men. Okay? It wasn't men and women. It was men who did all this stuff. All right? That's just a fact. Women were busy having 10 to 15 kids. They don't got much time for any of this stuff. Okay, the truth is that science based on Christian ethics is 1,000,000 times better than secular science. Secular science is all just chaos and corporations ripping everybody off. Now, Hitchens is a famous atheist. By the way, almost all of these famous atheists are on the payroll from the billionaire perverts, okay? Because imagine that you were a billionaire pervert. You want atheism to control society because if you got $1 billion, that means you have all the power. That means you could do whatever you want. Like in ancient Rome, if the Roman emperor or one of his friends wanted to have a woman in his bed, he could just, tell the family that she has to go to his bed. They have no rights. They have no power. And she'll be in his bed that night. Same thing. You've read about this in the Bible, these ancient cultures. Whoever's the king or the pharaoh can just say, give me your women. I want them in my bed. And there's nothing you can do. They've got the power. They take what they want. And so that's why, a billionaire would want everything based on money because they've got the money. Okay? The poor man needs to be created in the image of God and have some intrinsic rights or he's got nothing. Okay, and all these phony modern atheists, like I said, they're on the payroll of the billionaires. Nietzsche, his father was a pastor. He hated Christianity, and he said it was for wimps and slaves. His heroes were Napoleon and Bismarck. Nietzsche was a homosexual, okay? He was going to gay brothels, and he got syphilis, and he died from that, all right? Dennett and Dawkins, listen to what these jerks say. They say that it's harmful to teach religion to children, and therefore children should be taken away from their parents so they can be given a better education in atheism, okay? They want to take children away from their parents. The public schools in the West are designed to promote atheism because they know it weakens people. It turns them into wimps, makes them lazy. If a person thinks life is meaningless, then why not just become a hedonist, okay? If you look at the biology classes in the high schools, the colleges, and the grad schools, it's forbidden to even mention intelligent design. That's like a heresy. The professor would be fired. Many have been fired for that. A typical, Ivy League college professor like Richard Rorty, he says that kids arrive at colleges as bigoted, homophobic, religious fundamentalists who should be trained to become atheists like him. So basically, he's totally intolerant of other people's values unless they agree with him. And so if you don't think that anal sex should be a sacrament, then you're evil. Okay, that's his mentality. Okay, if you believe that life is meaning, then you're evil. Okay. Basically, what the atheists are saying is you must agree with them or they're going to take your children away and you're an evil piece of crap and they'll figure out some way to punish you. Okay? Not a very nice society, I would say. Dinesh D'Souza says, Christianity is the foundation of Western civilization, the root of our most cherished values. Astronomy, the fine-tuning arguments support Christianity, like the expanding universe, the Doppler shift. Okay, Darwin's point of view does not contradict the Christian point of view. The USA founders in 1776 were mostly Christian. The French Rev, which was mostly atheism, was bad in comparison. It led to 50,000 heads on the ground. Okay, and nobody cared about poor people before Christianity came along. Christianity gave them far better treatment, far more respect, gave much more respect to women than the Greeks or Romans ever did. It made the wife a protected person. It valued the family. It valued marriage. A husband couldn't just dump her in a ditch and go for a new, younger model. Christianity banned the gladiator games for their cruelty. It got rid of slavery around the world gradually. It built hospitals that cared for the poor. No one had done that before. Darwinism is totally overrated. The average stupid person from a public school, they think Darwinism is like real science. They don't understand. I majored in Darwinism, A-plus student in the subject, okay? It cannot explain macroevolution. It cannot explain at all the origin of life or the origin of complexity. It's a joke. It's only good for a reasonable explanation of microevolution, which means the variety within a given species. Whoop-de-doo, nobody cares about that. Hooray, you can breed different types of dogs, different types of cats. Who cares? That's got nothing to do with the big explanations. Where do all the different body types come from? Where does the Cambrian expansion come from? Where do orphan genes come from? It can't explain any of that stuff. Atheism and not Christianity. It is atheism that is responsible for all the biggest mass murders in history. It's like a 007, a license to justify mass bumping off of innocent citizens. And because it's like if Dostoevsky had said in Brothers Karamazov, if there is no God, then everything is permitted. Look what happened in the atheistic movements, French Rev, Russia after 1719, China with Mao, Germany in the 1930s. That was fascism, which was based on atheism. The rulers there, they hated Christianity. They were trying to get rid of it. Cuba with Fidel Castro, North Korea, Cambodia, anywhere communism and fascism, which fascism and communism are pretty much the same thing. It's atheistic control, okay? And wherever they take hold, they just bump off the citizenry. Atheism is not based on reason. It says life has no meaning. You can't have reason where there's no meaning. It says that everything comes from nothing. There is no right or wrong. What kind of a philosophy is that? How could everything come from nothing? What atheism says is that power can do whatever it wants, whatever it can get away with. You know, as of 2007, only 1 in 5 Europeans said religion was important for life. The Czechoslovakia leader Václav Havel had said Europe was the first atheist civilization in history. If you read the Bible, look at the Old Testament. Whenever a society loses its religious faith, it rapidly gets the crap beaten out of itself by outsiders, and then it gets taken over. And that's what's happening to the West. It's lost its religious foundation, and it's become a bunch of wimp sissies, and it's allowed its countries to be overrun and destroyed. That is what is happening. A good example is look at England. And then the little countries can't protect themselves. Ireland is just being brutalized, and all the other little countries, okay? They're screwed. And it's sad, and it's a disgrace, and it's a waste, okay? Islam is rapidly growing because, you know, they love their religion. They protect their religion. They're having big families, okay? But I don't think the billionaires are, I think the billionaires are just using them to destroy the West. I don't think the billionaires are going to let them stay in the West once they've destroyed it. I think that looks pretty obvious to me. The big long-term goal is to reduce the number of people and to impose slavery. That's what seems to be the case to me, you know. Okay, DDS, Dinesh D'Souza, likes Catholic writer G.K. Chesterton. He talks about how Darwinism claims survival of the fittest, whereas Christianity is survival of the sacred. That was a good line. He said that Dawkins claimed that Darwinism made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Dawkins is full of crap, okay? He's sort of clever and he's entertaining, but he's a big BS artist, okay? Don't be too impressed by Richard Dawkins. All he is a stooge paid off to promote atheism, all right? He doesn't have scientific insight. He doesn't know much more than mammal components of evolutionary biology. He can't explain any of these things. He can't explain the Cambrian. He can't explain orphan genes. He can't explain the lack of transitional fossils. He's lied lots of times, and he even admits it, okay? And these guys, Dawkins, Dennett, Nick Lane, and other of the big atheism promoters, they're on the payroll of the billionaires. You know, religion, it has lots of society benefits. It unifies the population, gets them to cooperate, to work together, to have common goals, common shared values, a common transcendent sense of purpose, a moral high ground, an energizing myth if you want to call that, but they're good to go. Behavior, goals, a zest for life. And they got the energy to build a cathedral, do all kinds of wonderful things. Whereas when a society becomes atheist, instead of having babies, they bump them off, and then they sell their body parts for money, and they even cannibalize them, okay? That's evil. Atheism leads to evil. It's a justification for it, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn had said that. He said, what was it that caused the death of 65 million Christians in Russia and the burning down of 48,000 churches? It was atheism. And anybody who studied history knows that atheism destroys a society and leads to massive slavery. And it looks like we're headed into that, but hopefully not. Hopefully things will get better. We'll see. Anyways, that's the book. Oh, hey, I want to show you two pictures. I'm going to show you two pictures here. I forgot something else. Dinesh D'Souza's book is New York Times bestseller, and all it is text, not one picture, and it's a Protestant mentality. There's nothing about the aesthetic beauty of the saints, the Virgin Mary, the feast days, all this great Catholic stuff. I made a book, Best Christian Art, Best Christian Songs, but I'm not famous. Nobody's ever heard of me, so nobody even knows about my books exist. But mine are 10 times better than this. Because, see, I got pictures. I talk about the beauty of it, not just the, the same old stuff everybody's a little tired of. Do what I say if you want to go to heaven. But don't get me wrong. His book was good, but if you read Mere Christianity, there wasn't much new. And I thought this book here, Chateaubriand, The Genius of Christianity was rather beautiful. Look how massive this book is, 700 pages, because he gets into the aesthetic, philosophical stuff. You need the words of Jesus. Love thy neighbor. That which you do to the least of my brethren, you do unto me. So that everybody's nice to everybody. Because most people are poor and weak. Unless you got a rule that says be nice to the poor and the weak are always going to be getting their butt kicked, ripped off, enslaved, and brutalized. So you have to have something to protect them. Okay, I wrote Best of the West, all these beautiful pictures. My books are full of beautiful pictures, paintings, and aesthetically wonderful things. And I wrote all about the hidden history of nutrition, health, and science, whereby almost all the science, if you go back to before 1900, almost all of it was from Christian men, okay? There's a few exceptions here and there, and after 1900s there's a lot more exceptions, but I make the point, that's where it all came from. The rest of the world, there was sort of like, there's third world, they didn't do almost anything scientifically. There's the East, did almost nothing scientifically. And then there's the old world and the new world, Europe and the USA. And that's where most stuff came from, was Europe. It's just a fact. Anybody can look it up. Anyways, there it is. Hope you found it helpful.